Imagine this. You're alone at 2 in the morning, separated from the outside world by a thin pane of drive-through glass. A car pulls up. Windows so dark you can't see inside. A hand emerges from the darkness, pays for food they'll never collect, and disappears into the night. Strange, right? But harmless. At least that's what I thought. Until the fourth time it happened. Until the voice on the other end whispered my last name. A name they had no right to know. That's when I realized that this wasn't some quirky customer with money to waste. This was someone hunting me. And by the time I understood what was happening, it was already far too late to escape. Before we begin this terrifying journey, if you're new here, welcome to Silent Fear, where real nightmares become stories that will haunt you long after you finish listening. Make sure to hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss what comes next. Drop a like if you're brave enough to hear how this ends, and let me know in the comments if you've ever felt like someone was watching you from the shadows. Your support keeps this channel alive. Now take a deep breath and settle in, because what you're about to hear is going to change the way you see the night shift forever. My name is Evans Hurley. I'm 24 years old, and for the past 2 years, I've been working the overnight shift at a Burger King located on the eastern edge of town, tucked between a dying commercial district and miles of empty road. The shift runs from 10 at night until 4 in the morning. 6 long hours of fluorescent lights, the smell of fryer oil, and the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every sound. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Fast food worker at 24? Not exactly living the dream, right? And you'd be correct. This wasn't my grand plan for life. I didn't graduate high school dreaming of working drive-through windows and mopping floors at 3 in the morning, but life has a way of not going according to plan, and sometimes you take the jobs that are available, not the jobs you want. The truth is, the overnight shift suited me in ways I didn't expect. See, I've always been a natural night owl. Even as a kid, I'd stay awake until the sun came up, lost in video games or movies or books, while the rest of my family slept. There's something about the night that's always felt more real to me than the day, more honest somehow. During daylight hours, everyone's performing, putting on their work faces, their social masks, pretending to be versions of themselves that aren't quite true. But at night, people drop those pretenses. You see them as they really are, or at least that's what I used to believe before all of this happened. Before I learned that the night doesn't reveal truth, it conceals monsters. The Burger King where I work sits in a location that's basically abandoned after dark. There's a 24-hour gas station about a quarter mile down the road that gets occasional traffic. Across the street, there's a strip mall that's been slowly dying for years. Most of the storefronts empty and dark. Beyond that, just vacant parking lots, closed businesses, and stretches of road that lead to residential areas where everyone's asleep. During my shift, I'm typically the only employee in the entire building. Sometimes a manager will hang around until midnight to handle the deposit and do some administrative work, but after that, it's just me, alone with the fryers, the registers, the drive-through window, and whatever customers happen to wander through in the dead of night. The job itself isn't complicated. Take orders through the drive-through speaker. Prepare the food, handle the payment at the first window, hand over the order at the second window, clean the equipment, wipe down counters. every hour do a mandatory walkthrough of the dining room and bathrooms, even though we lock the doors to inside customers at 11 and nobody's in there anyway. It's repetitive work, mindless work, the kind of thing you can do on autopilot after the first few weeks. On an average night, I might take 10 to 15 orders during my entire shift, sometimes fewer. The money wasn't great, minimum wage plus whatever small raises they'd given me over 2 years, but it covered my rent for a small one-bedroom apartment, kept my utilities on, put gas in my car, and left enough for food and basic expenses. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was stable, predictable, safe. At least that's what I thought. What I'm about to tell you unfolded over approximately 5 weeks. 5 weeks that started with something odd but harmless, escalated into something unsettling, and finally exploded into a nightmare that I'm still living through as I tell you this story. It began on a Wednesday night about 1 month ago. The exact date isn't important, but I remember it was a Wednesday because Wednesdays were always the slowest nights. Something about the middle of the week. People were tired, broke from the weekend, not yet energized for Thursday and Friday. Whatever the reason, Wednesday nights dragged. This particular Wednesday had been exceptionally quiet. In the first 3 hours of my shift, from 10 until 1 in the morning, I think I'd taken maybe 4 or 5 orders total. Long stretches of nothing punctuated by the occasional car pulling through. I'd spent most of the time on my phone, scrolling through social media, watching videos, killing time. Around 1:30, I was leaning against the counter, debating whether to start some of the cleaning tasks early just to have something to do, when I heard the sensor chime. The electronic ding that meant a car had pulled up to the drive-through speaker. I set my phone down and walked over to the speaker system, pressing the button. "Welcome to Burger King, order when you're ready." The voice that came through was male. I'd estimate middle-aged based on the tone, though it's hard to tell through the static of the speaker. Nothing particularly distinctive about it. No strong accent, no unusual speech patterns, just a normal voice ordering food. "Yeah, I'll get a large double Whopper with cheese meal. Make the drink a Coke." "Sure thing," I replied, punching the order into the register. "That'll be $11.47 at the first window." "Thanks." Completely standard interaction. The kind I'd had thousands of times over 2 years of working there. Nothing about it raised any red flags or caught my attention as unusual. I walked to the kitchen area and started preparing his order. While the burger cooked, I bagged the fries, filled the large Coke, and got everything ready. The whole process took maybe 3 or 4 minutes. With the order complete, I moved to the first window and waited for the car to pull around. When it did, that's when I noticed the first detail that struck me as slightly odd. The car was a dark sedan. Black or possibly very dark blue. It was hard to tell under the yellowish parking lot lights. 4-door, looked relatively new and well-maintained. But what really caught my attention was the windows. They were tinted, heavily tinted. Not the light tint you see on lots of cars, but dark enough that I couldn't see inside at all. Not even a shadow or silhouette. Just blackness behind the glass. The driver's side window began to lower, but it only went down about 2 or 3 inches. Just enough to create a narrow horizontal gap. Through that gap, a hand emerged. Pale skin, no jewelry or distinguishing marks that I could see, holding a credit card between 2 fingers. I took the card, swiped it through the reader, waited for the approval, and handed it back along with the receipt. The entire time, I couldn't see the person's face, couldn't see their clothes, their build, anything that might help me identify them later. Just that hand there and gone in a matter of seconds. Your food will be ready at the next. Your food will be window, I said, gesturing toward the second window about 20 feet ahead, where I'd have the order waiting. The hand withdrew into the darkness. The window rolled back up. The gap disappeared. And then, instead of pulling forward to the pickup window, like every normal customer does, I heard the engine rev. The car accelerated, driving right past the second window, through the parking lot and out onto the main road. Within seconds, the tail lights had disappeared into the night. I stood there for a moment, confused, holding a bag containing a large double Whopper with cheese meal and a large Coke. I stared at the empty parking lot, waiting, assuming this had to be a mistake. Maybe an emergency call had come through and the driver had to leave urgently. Maybe they'd forgotten something and would circle back. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. The food sat on the counter, getting colder. The ice in the Coke slowly melting. Eventually, I accepted that whoever had ordered this food wasn't coming back for it. When my shift ended at 4 a.m. and the bag was still sitting there, untouched, I made a decision. The food was paid for. It would just get thrown away otherwise. So I took it home with me. I ate the Whopper sitting on my couch at 4:30 in the morning, watching some mindless television show, and tried not to think too hard about why someone would pay for food they had no intention of collecting. People do weird things sometimes. Maybe it was a dare. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe 100 different explanations that made sense. I went to sleep that morning without giving it much more thought. Exactly 1 week later, almost to the hour, it happened again. I was working another quiet shift. This time it was a Tuesday, around 1:45 in the morning. The sensor chimed. I pressed the button. That same voice came through the speaker. I didn't recognize it as the same voice at the time. After all, I hear dozens of voices every week, and most of them blend together. But looking back, I'm certain it was him. Yeah, I'll get a large double Whopper with cheese meal. Make the drink a Coke. Word for word, the exact same order as the previous week. I punched it in, gave him the total, prepared the food, and moved to the window. The same dark sedan pulled up. Same heavily tinted windows. Same narrow gap when the window lowered. Same pale hand extending from the darkness with a credit card. I processed the payment, handed back the receipt, and said, "Your food will be ready at the next window." And just like before, the car drove away, without stopping to collect the order. I stood there watching the taillights disappear, and this time a thought occurred to me. That's really weird. Someone did the exact same thing last week. I wonder if this is the same person, but even then, even with that thought crossing my mind, I didn't fully connect the dots. Coincidences happen, right? Maybe this was a different person who'd made the same unusual choice for completely unrelated reasons. The food sat there for the rest of my shift, and once again, when 4 a.m. rolled around, I took it home and ate it. Free meal number 2. Part of me knew it was strange, but another part of me, the practical, broke part that was living paycheck to paycheck, couldn't see any reason to complain about free food. If you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a like for Silent Fear. Your support means everything. 1 week after that, 3 weeks into this pattern, it happened for the third time. It was a Thursday night, maybe 1:50 in the morning. I was actually expecting it this time. though I couldn't have told you why. Just a feeling, an instinct. The sensor chimed. I pressed the button and that voice came through again. Yeah, I'll get a large double Whopper with cheese meal. Make the drink a Coke. And that's when it finally truly clicked in my brain. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't multiple people making the same bizarre choice. This was the same person, and whatever they were doing it deliberately, intentionally. As part of some pattern I didn't understand, I prepared the food with a growing sense of unease. When the dark sedan pulled up to the window, I paid much closer attention this time. I tried to see past the tinted glass, tried to catch any detail about the person inside. Nothing. The tint was too dark, and with only that narrow gap in the window, I couldn't see anything except that pale hand. I processed the payment, handed back the receipt, watched the car drive away without collecting the food. This time, standing there with the bag in my hands, I felt genuinely unsettled. Why would someone do this? Come to the same fast food restaurant, order the same meal, pay for it, and then deliberately not collect it. It made no logical sense. Unless the food was never the point. But if not the food, then what? What was the point? I spent the rest of that shift turning the question over in my mind, examining it from every angle, trying to find an explanation that made sense. By the time I got home that morning, I still hadn't come up with one. I ate the Whopper slowly that day, sitting at my kitchen table, thinking. Part of me knew I should probably report this to my manager, or maybe even the police. But report what exactly? That someone was buying food and not collecting it? That's not a crime. It's weird, sure, but not illegal. Not threatening. At least, not yet. So I made a decision. I was going to let this play out. If it happened again, maybe I'd reconsider. But for now, I was getting free meals out of the deal, and whoever this person was, they weren't actually doing anything harmful. That decision, looking back, might have been the biggest mistake of my life. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued with eerie consistency. Every 4 or 5 days, usually sometime between 1 and 3 in the morning, that dark sedan would pull up. The same voice would order a large double Whopper with cheese meal with a Coke. The same narrow gap in the window, the same pale hand, the same payment, the same departure without collecting food. I started to anticipate it, started to look forward to it in a weird way. It became a strange little ritual in my otherwise monotonous nights. It's been 4 days. Wonder if my mysterious benefactor will show up tonight. And more often than not, he would. I stopped feeling unsettled about it. I rationalized it. Convinced myself it was harmless. Just some eccentric person with money to waste and reasons I'd never understand. Maybe they got some kind of satisfaction out of it. Maybe it was their way of doing a good deed anonymously. Maybe 1,000 explanations that I'd never know. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have known, was that this wasn't kindness. This was groundwork. This was someone studying me, learning my patterns, establishing a routine that would make me comfortable, making me trust that this was harmless. Setting the trap. It was a Friday night when everything changed. Friday the 13th, actually, though I didn't realize the date until later. Maybe that should have been a warning. The shift had been unusually quiet, even for a Friday. I think I'd taken maybe 6 or 7 orders in the first 4 hours. The kind of night where time moves like molasses and you find yourself watching the clock obsessively, counting down the minutes until you can leave. Around 2 in the morning, I was standing at the drive-through area, scrolling through my phone, barely paying attention when I heard that familiar sensor chime. I set my phone down and pressed the button, already knowing what I was about to hear. That voice came through the speaker exactly as expected. "Yeah, I'll get a large double Whopper with cheese meal. Make the drink a Coke." I punched in the order, my fingers moving on autopilot. $11.47 at the first. Window. I prepared the food, moved to the window, and waited. The dark sedan pulled up. Same routine as always. The window lowered just those few inches, creating that narrow gap. The pale hand emerged, holding a credit card. I took it, processed the payment, and handed back the receipt. And then instead of the car immediately driving away like it always did, it just sat there. Engine idling. Not moving. I stood there, confused, waiting to see what would happen next. That's when he spoke. Not through the drive-through speaker this time, but directly through that gap in the window. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, like we were old friends having a casual chat. "I hope you've been enjoying those Whoppers, Mr. Hurley." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Mr. Hurley. My last name. Time seemed to stop. Every muscle in my body locked up. My brain stuttered, unable to process what I just heard. My name tag, the one pinned to my uniform, only displays my first name. Just Evans. Nothing more. The employee schedule is posted in the back office, not anywhere customers can access. My full name doesn't appear on receipts. It's not written on any signage. There is absolutely no legitimate reason a customer would know my last name unless they'd specifically gone looking for it, unless they'd researched me, unless they knew more about me than just my face at a drive-through window. The fear hit me all at once, a wave of pure terror that made my hands start shaking. I grabbed the microphone with trembling fingers and pressed it close to my mouth. "Who are you?" My voice came out high and tight, edged with panic I couldn't control. "How do you know my name?" Silence. I said, "Who are you? Answer me." Nothing, just the sound of that engine idling. "What do you want? Why are you doing this?" Still no response. "Who the hell are you?" I heard his engine rev once, twice, and then he was gone, tires squealing as he accelerated out of the parking lot and disappeared into the night. I stood there alone, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't random. This had never been random. Someone had been watching me, learning about me, playing some kind of sick game with me for weeks, and I'd been too naive, too trusting, too focused on the free food to see it. The rest of my shift was a blur of paranoia and fear. Every car that passed the restaurant made me jump. Every shadow beyond the windows looked like a person standing there, watching. I kept checking the cameras, scanning the parking lot, convinced he was still out there somewhere, observing me. When 4 in the morning finally came and I could leave, I practically ran to my car. I locked the doors before I'd even sat down, checked the back seat to make sure nobody was hiding there, and drove home faster than I should have, constantly checking my rear-view mirror. All I wanted was to get inside my apartment, lock every door and window, and try to convince myself that this was all some misunderstanding, some weird coincidence. But when I pulled into my apartment complex and walked up to my door, I saw something that shattered any hope of that. There was a piece of paper on my doorstep, white printer paper, folded neatly in half, placed precisely in front of my door where I couldn't possibly miss it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I picked it up. I stood there in the dim light of the apartment hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs, and slowly unfolded it. The message inside was handwritten in blue ballpoint pen. The handwriting was surprisingly neat, almost elegant. Precise letters, careful spacing, and in the very center of the page, just 8 words. I know what you did. You have 3 days. I read it once, then again, then a third time, as if the words might change if I stared at them long enough. They didn't. I felt like I was going to vomit, actually physically sick. My vision started to blur at the edges, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. What did I do? What was this person talking about? I searched my memory desperately, frantically, going back months and years, looking for something, anything that could explain this. Some person I'd wronged, some mistake I'd made, some secret I'd forgotten. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm not an interesting person. I don't live a dramatic life. I'm a 24-year-old fast food worker who lives in a mediocre apartment and spends his free time playing video games and watching Netflix. I don't have enemies. I've never hurt anyone. I've never been in serious trouble. I've never done anything that would make someone target me like this. So why? Why was this happening to me? I unlocked my apartment door with shaking hands and went inside, but I didn't feel safe. Not at all. I turned on every single light in the apartment, every lamp, every overhead fixture, the light above the stove, even the small night light in the bathroom. I needed to see, everything needed to know I was alone. I checked every room methodically, looked in every closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain, in the kitchen pantry, anywhere a person could possibly hide. Nobody was there. I was alone. But somehow that didn't make me feel any better. I sat on my couch with that note in my hands, staring at those 8 words until they stopped looking like letters and just became shapes, abstract symbols that meant my life was falling apart. 3 days. I had 3 days until... What? What was supposed to happen? What did this person want? I didn't sleep that night. I physically couldn't. My body was flooded with adrenaline, my mind racing through possibilities and scenarios, each one worse than the last. I just sat there with all the lights on, watching my front door, waiting for something terrible to happen. But nothing did. The night passed in agonizing silence. Nobody knocked. Nobody tried to break in. The hours crawled by until finally, mercifully, the sun started to rise. I had to work again the next night. I needed the money desperately. My rent was due in less than a week, and I couldn't afford to call in sick, no matter how terrified I was. So I went. The entire shift, I was wound so tight, I thought I might snap. Every single car that pulled up to the drive-thru sent a jolt of fear through me. I kept expecting to hear that voice again, kept expecting to see that dark sedan with those tinted windows. Around 2:30 in the morning, my worst fear materialized. The sensor chimed. I approached the speaker with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling and pressed the button. Welcome to Burger King. That voice came through. The same voice that had said my name, cold, calm, emotionless. I need you to write something down. Every instinct I had screamed at me to refuse, to hang up, to run, to call the police right then and there. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stood there frozen. Are you listening? He asked. What do you want? I managed to whisper. Write this down, he repeated, ignoring my question. 723 Marsh Road. That's on the east side of town, past the industrial district. Do you know where that is? I did know. Marsh Road was in one of the worst parts of town. where the city gave way to abandoned warehouses and empty lots. Not a place anyone went after dark if they had any sense. "I know where that is," I said. "Good. You have 2 days from right now. Bring $10,000 in cash to that address. Put it in a bag, doesn't matter what kind, and leave it by the back door of the building. If you do this, if you follow these instructions exactly, I'll leave you alone. You'll never hear from me again." He paused, and in that silence, I could hear my own heartbeat. "If you don't..." He let the sentence hang there, unfinished, which was somehow more terrifying than any specific threat could have been. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" he asked. "I don't have that kind of money," I said, and I heard the desperation bleeding into my voice. "I don't have anywhere close to $10,000. I can't possibly..." "2 days, Mr. Hurley. Starting now." The line went dead. I heard his car drive away, and I just stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. $10,000. He wanted $10,000 in cash delivered to some abandoned building in 2 days. It was impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. I checked my bank account on my phone right there at work. I had $834. That was it. That was everything I had to my name. And most of that was already earmarked for rent and bills. There was no way I could get $10,000 in 2 days. I could borrow from friends and family, but I didn't have enough people in my life who could collectively loan me that much. I could try to get a loan, but no bank would approve something like that in 48 hours for someone with my credit and income. It was impossible. For a brief moment, I almost laughed. The sheer absurdity of it. This had to be a joke, some elaborate, cruel prank. But the note on my doorstep, the way he knew my name, the weeks of surveillance and pattern building, none of that felt like a joke. When I got home that morning, I triple-checked every lock. I pushed my couch in front of the door. I took a kitchen knife, a large one, the kind used for cutting meat, and set it on my nightstand next to my bed. I still didn't call the police. I don't know why. Fear, maybe? Embarrassment? A strange sense that involving them would somehow make everything worse, that this person would find out and escalate. I went to work the next night and the night after that. The 2-day deadline he'd given me came and went. I didn't deliver any money because I didn't have any money to deliver. Part of me hoped that would be the end of it. That he'd realize I was serious about not having the money and would just move on. Find a different target. I should have known better. 3 nights after his demand, I came home from my shift around 4:30 in the morning. I was so exhausted I could barely think straight. My body felt like it was made of concrete. All I wanted was to collapse on my couch, zone out in front of the television for an hour, and try to get a few hours of sleep before my brain started racing again. I made it exactly 18 minutes before my world exploded. I was sitting there, half watching some late-night infomercial about kitchen knives, my eyes starting to drift closed when the sound ripped through the apartment. Crash. The noise was so loud, so sudden and violent, that I threw myself to the floor on pure instinct. My brain immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. Someone was shooting at me. This was it. This was how I was going to die. I stayed flat on the ground, my heart trying to explode out of my chest, waiting for more gunshots. They never came. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds, I slowly lifted my head and looked around. My living room window, the large one that faced the parking lot, was completely shattered. Glass was everywhere. On the floor, on my couch, on the coffee table, glittering under the lamplight like diamonds. And in the middle of the floor, surrounded by shards of broken glass, was a rock, about the size of a baseball, gray and rough. Someone had thrown a rock through my window. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the broken window, careful not to step on the glass. I looked out into the parking lot, searching for whoever had done this. Nothing. Nobody. Just parked cars and empty space and the quiet of early morning. Whoever had thrown that rock was long gone. That's when I finally called the police. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. When the dispatcher answered, I'm not even sure I was making sense. I told him everything. The stranger at the drive-thru who'd been buying food for weeks. The way he knew my name, the note on my doorstep, the demand for money, the address he'd given me, the shattered window. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. They examined the rock, took photographs, asked me questions, and wrote everything down in their little notebooks. They told me they'd increase patrols in my area. They suggested I install security cameras if I could afford them. They said they'd check out the address on Marsh Road to see if there was anything suspicious there. But I could see it in their eyes that they didn't think this was serious. To them, this was probably just some prank. Some kid with too much time on their hands. Nothing to really worry about. One officer suggested that I might want to contact Burger King's corporate office and see if they could pull the credit card information from those Whopper orders. Maybe that would lead somewhere. I promised I would. They left around 5:30 in the morning, and I was alone again with my shattered window and my fear. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I've called in sick to work every single night. I know it's not really protecting me. This person clearly knows where I live, knows my schedule, knows everything about me. But I cannot force myself to go back to that drive-through window. Every time I even think about it, I feel physically ill, nauseous, dizzy. The problem is I can't afford to not work much longer. My rent is due in 4 days. I don't have savings to fall back on. I don't have family nearby who can help. And I definitely don't have the money to move to a new apartment, even if I wanted to. I'm trapped. Completely and utterly trapped. In this nightmare, I keep thinking about that address. 723 Marsh Road. I've driven past that area a few times in my life. I know it's industrial, empty. The kind of place where bad things happen and nobody's around to hear you scream. Part of me wonders if I should go there, not to deliver money I don't have, but just to look, to see what's there, to try to understand what any of this is about. But I know that would be stupid. Possibly the stupidest thing I could do. Going to a location specified by someone who's been stalking me would be walking right into whatever trap they've set. So instead, I sit here in my apartment with cardboard taped over my broken window, with all the lights on, with a knife within arm's reach, and I wait. I wait for the police to find something, though I'm not holding my breath. I wait for this person to make their next move, whatever that might be. I wait to understand why any of this is happening to me. The worst part, the absolute worst part of all of this, is the not knowing who this person is, not knowing what I supposedly did to deserve this, not knowing what they really want from me. I've started keeping detailed notes. Every car I see more than once in my apartment parking lot, every person who looks at me for too long when I go to buy groceries, every strange noise in the hallway outside my door, every unfamiliar number that calls my phone. I'm looking over my shoulder constantly, jumping at shadows, sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours a night, and even then, only in short bursts before the nightmares wake me up. This is what real terror feels like. Not the momentary fear you get from a jump scare in a movie, not the brief adrenaline rush of a roller coaster, but the slow, grinding, relentless kind of terror that seeps into every single moment of your existence, that makes you question everything, that turns your entire world into a potential threat, that makes you wonder if you're ever going to feel safe again. I don't know how this story ends. I don't know if the police will find this person. I don't know if they'll come for me again, or if they'll escalate, or if one night I'll wake up to find them standing over my bed. All I know for certain, is that somewhere out there in this city, someone is watching me. Someone who knows my name, knows where I live, knows my schedule, knows my habits. Someone who's been playing a game with me for weeks, and I still don't understand the rules or the objective. Someone who bought me dinner, again and again, until I let my guard down. And now they're collecting payment. If this story left you terrified and looking over your own shoulder, make sure you subscribe to Silent Fear for more real horror stories that will haunt your nights. Smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you think Evan should do next. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who take their time. The ones who watch and wait and plan. The ones who know exactly where you live and exactly when you're most vulnerable. Stay safe out there, if you still can. And I'll see you in the next story, if you're brave enough to return.